This is a map of the Gaza Strip. Normally, people pin airstrikes, troops, and ruins on it. We're going to pin something different. McDonald's, Starbucks, Nestlé, Coca-Cola, SodaStream, Zara, Unilever, and others. In this film, we're interested in one thing. Which of these companies actually have money, factories, licenses, or business interests connected to this map, and which ones are just victims of a protest trend? McDonald's, burgers for the IDF, and a boycott across MENA. What actually happened? In October 2023, just after the Hamas attack, McDonald's Israel announced that it had donated tens of thousands of free meals to Israeli soldiers, police officers, and healthcare workers. It was a decision made by the local franchise, but in Muslim-majority countries the reaction was immediate. Hashtags calling to boycott McDonald's exploded. On social media, the meme was simple. You buy a burger. You feed the army that's bombing Gaza. And what did the headquarters say? McDonald's CEO, Chris Kempczynski, repeated several times that this was a local franchise decision. He complained about misinformation spreading on social media. But he also openly admitted that the boycott in Muslim countries is materially hurting the company. In its 2024 reports, McDonald's points to the Gaza conflict and the boycott as one of the main reasons for weaker performance in the Middle East and Africa region. On top of that, in 2024, the company decided to buy back all restaurants in Israel from the local operator, a move many analysts see as an attempt to regain control over a spiraling PR crisis. The fact is, McDonald's doesn't have a factory in an illegal settlement. But the decision of the local chain to feed, for free, an army running a brutal operation in Gaza triggered a boycott that the global headquarters now openly describes as a financial problem. Starbucks, a sharp drop in foot traffic. Officially, Starbucks says it's apolitical. In its statements, the company denies funding the Israeli government or the IDF and stresses that it has no special partnership with the Israeli authorities. Despite that, in 2023 and 2024, the chain became one of the main boycott symbols in MENA countries and among pro-Palestinian activists. In the West, boycott Starbucks slogans were everywhere. So what do the numbers say? CEO Laxman Narasimhan doesn't sugarcoat it. The conflict in the Middle East, combined with confusion and anger around the company's stance, led to a significant drop in traffic and sales in several key markets. This is not about a symbolic protest by a few influencers. It's about real, measurable declines in revenue in countries where people started choosing local coffee instead of Starbucks. And the links to the war? There's no factory in a settlement, no donations to the IDF. What there is the perception that Starbucks is part of a Western system that backs Israel. And that perception alone was enough to hit the company's results. KFC, Pizza Hut, Burger King, Americana, and minus 48% profit in Arab countries. Most KFC, Pizza Hut, Burger King, Krispy Kreme, and other big-name restaurants in the region belong to a single giant, Americana Restaurants. After October 7th, these brands became a prime target for mass boycotts, seen as American symbols tied to pro-Israeli policies. Hashtags urged people to swap KFC for local fried chicken and Pizza Hut for neighborhood pizzerias. The result? In its 2024 reports, Americana records a 48% drop in net profit over just 9 months. Revenues fall by double digits, and the company directly points to the boycott of Western brands linked in public perception to Israel as one of the key reasons. In 2025, profits are still around 40% lower than the year before. The share price drops. Management announces a stronger focus on local brands, less dependent on the image of the United States. And that shows something important. A boycott in the MENA region can wipe out almost half of a corporation's profit, even if, on paper, It doesn't own a single factory in a settlement. Coca-Cola and Pepsi, the Atarot plant, and Palestine Cola. Coca-Cola has a plant in Atarot. The rights to Coca-Cola in Israel are held by the Central Bottling Company, which runs a production facility in the Atarot Industrial Zone on the outskirts of East Jerusalem, an area that the UN and most states consider part of the occupied Palestinian territories. That means a global soft drink brand is directly tied to occupied land through its local bottler. After the war broke out, many Muslim-majority countries saw a fresh wave of boycotts targeting Coke and Pepsi. Local alternatives like Gaza Cola, Mecca Cola, Palestine Cola started appearing on shelves, sold as patriotic drinks without blood on the label. Reuters and other business outlets report falling soft drink sales in some MENA countries, and note that global corporations have been forced to revise their growth forecasts for the region downward. Pepsi has another story attached to it. It bought the Israeli company SodaStream, which for years operated a factory in the Mishor Adumim settlement in the West Bank. After years of BDS pressure, the plant was moved inside Israel to the Nakab/Negev. The company insists this was a purely business decision. For activists, it's proof that boycott pressure can literally force a change of location. Unilever and Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream war. In 2021, Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream brand owned by Unilever, announced that it would stop selling its products in Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. It was one of the first big mainstream brands to openly take a stance against the settlements, and the backlash was immediate and costly. Politicians in the U.S. and Israel accused the company of boycotting Israel. Some U.S. state pension funds threatened to pull their investments from Unilever. Unilever, in turn, tried to bypass the decision by selling the Israeli Ben & Jerry's business to a local licensee, which triggered legal battles and more controversy. At the same time, in several Muslim-majority countries, Unilever started appearing on boycott lists as a company linked to Israel. In Indonesia, its market share fell from about 38.5% to 34.9% in a single year. The company openly admits that boycotts have hit its sales. Globally, by 2025, Unilever is reporting weaker results, and analysts list the ongoing reputational crisis around Palestine as one of the contributing factors. This is a good example of a company caught in the middle. On one hand, it tries to limit its presence in the settlements. On the other, it still pays the price of the boycott because for many consumers, it remains just another Western corporation. Carrefour, the boycott that pushed a brand out of an entire country. Carrefour, the French supermarket giant, also became a boycott target over its presence on the Israeli market and partnerships with local companies accused of having ties to settlements. In Jordan, after months of boycott campaigns, sales began to collapse. In November 2024, it was announced that Carrefour would completely pull out of Jordan, closing all of its stores. In Morocco and Tunisia, Carrefour's local partners admitted that the boycott was having a real impact on their results. The company has to constantly balance its French brand image with strong pro-Palestinian sentiment on the ground. This is one of the rare cases where a boycott quite literally forced a retail chain out of an entire country. Zara, Puma, and the sporty side of the boycott. Zara, the Spanish fashion giant, walked straight into a storm in 2023. The brand released a campaign, a mannequin wrapped in white fabric, in the background, broken statues, rubble, concrete. At a moment when the world was watching real ruins in Gaza, the campaign was read as brutally tone-deaf. Online #BoycottZara exploded. The company removed the campaign from its main page and explained that the photos were taken before the war. The BDS movement officially called for a boycott of Zara, accusing the brand of normalizing Israeli crimes. Puma spent years as the sponsor of the Israeli Football Federation. After a long BDS campaign and pressure from fans, the company ended its sponsorship of Israel's national team. BDS declared it a victory, proof that consumer pressure can force a global brand to change course. Media in the MENA region also mentioned Nike and other sports brands as companies that have seen falling sales in some Muslim-majority countries because they're perceived as part of the Western Bloc backing Israel, even if the hard numbers are less transparent than in the cases of Americana or Unilever. Airbnb, Booking, TripAdvisor, tourism in the settlements. Tourism platforms aren't as flashy as burgers or cola, but in the settlements, their role is crucial. The UN and human rights organizations list Airbnb, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, Expedia, Hotels.com as companies offering accommodation and tourist services in Israeli settlements like Ma'ale Adumim, Ariel, Kiryat Arba. Airbnb in 2018 announced that it would remove listings in the settlements. After lawsuits and political pressure, it later reversed that decision. By 2025, the platform was still facing investigations in places like Ireland, where a court ordered police to examine whether doing business in the settlements violates the law. This isn't a classic consumer boycott. It's legal and political pressure, the kind that can translate into costly court cases, compensation claims, and being forced to pull out of parts of a market. Tech, concrete, and insurance. The quiet front of the big corporations. Finally, the companies you don't see in memes, but you do see in UN and BDS reports. HP/Hewlett-Packard, IT systems for Israel's population registry, police, and army. Motorola Solutions, communication systems and watchtowers around the settlements. CAF, a Spanish company, building a tram line in Jerusalem that links settlements to the rest of the city. Heidelberg Materials, cement, aggregates, and plants in industrial zones across the West Bank. Allianz, AXA, global insurance giants investing in Israeli banks and arms companies linked to the settlements. They're the ones building the infrastructure of the occupation: concrete, tracks, servers, insurance policies. Here we don't see a spectacular minus 48% profit because of a boycott, like in the case of Americana. What we do see is growing legal and financial risk, funds pulling their money out of these companies, more and more states introducing rules against investing in firms that support the settlement enterprise. After putting all of this together, we're left with one simple question. Do boycotts of big corporations actually change anything? What do they definitely change? Real financial losses. McDonald's, Starbucks, Americana, KFC, Pizza Hut, Nestlé, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Carrefour. These companies themselves admit to falling sales, shrinking profits, and lower market share because of boycotts linked to the war in Gaza. Changes in corporate behavior. SodaStream moves its factory from a settlement into Israel proper. Ben & Jerry's tries to limit sales in the settlements. Puma drops its sponsorship of the Israeli Football Federation. Americana reshapes its portfolio to rely less on American brands. And in financial reports, next to inflation and exchange rates, a new line appears in the risk factors section: the Gaza conflict and consumer boycotts. What doesn't a boycott do on its own? It doesn't instantly stop the bombing. It doesn't dismantle the arms industry. It doesn't overnight rewrite government policy. But it does do something else. It signals that war and occupation are no longer free for big corporations, that a factory in a settlement, free meals for an army, or sponsoring a controversial project can come with a price: falling sales, damaged reputation and nervous shareholders. So, what do we do with all of this? This film isn't here to hand you a clean list saying, these brands are innocent, these brands are guilty. What it does show is where the documented concrete links between corporations, occupation, and war exist, where the boycott actually hits financial results, and how the money flows from your soda, your burger, your ice cream, your airline ticket, all the way to factories, warehouses, and facilities and settlements. In the end, one question remains, and no one can answer it for you. Do you want to live as if this is just politics happening somewhere far away? Or when you look at a label, a logo, a brand name, do you want to know which side of this story your money is standing on?